So welcome everyone to our fireside chat on tech-empowered HR leadership, navigating complexity with simplicity. I'm Karan, I'm founder of HR1. So HR1 is the simplest HR software to automate most complex HR processes for enterprises. So today we have a pleasure of having Amit Malik, a seasoned HR leader, to share his valuable insights on leveraging technology to simplify HR operations and to transform organization. So I would really request Amit to introduce himself to the audience.
Thank you, Karan, and thank you for having me, People Matters. It's a pleasure to be here. I know it's a very after lunch session, which I would always, is there, but we'll try and make it as interesting. A little bit about myself. Yes, I was an HR leader. I pivoted many times in my career. So started as an HR person, moved on to do a COO role, then a CEO and a managing director role, and then decided to go and work in a fintech. So I work for WardSpay, which is a blockchain-based payments organization based out of Singapore, and that's been my 24 years of journey. On a personal side, I'm father to 2 boys and husband to my 1 wife.
So thank you, Amit, for sharing your background with us. So let's dive in. So Amit, we understand the importance of starting with a clear purpose before adopting any technology. So could you please share with us an experience where the start with why approach led your organization to a remarkable HR tech transformation?
Well, start with why. I think it's something that's been talked about very often. Every management guru talks about why you should start with why. So let me focus on the why a little bit, and I'll give you 2 different perspectives, right? Because I've straddled 2 worlds. I think if you are an HR leader, whatever initiative you want to take from tech transformation standpoint, we all do start with why. But I think somewhere in the journey, we focus so much on the how and what we will get out of it that we start to miss why we started on that journey. And I think that's very, very important for the how and the what to not cannibalize the why of the organization. And I'll tell you why. Because, if you are an HR leader and you're starting on this journey, you will at the end need to go to a management team, need to go to your CFO and CEO, need to go to a board maybe depending on what the initiative is. And the most of the times, the question that everyone struggles to answer is why are we doing it, right? And a lot of us talk about what will happen if we do it, what will not happen if we don't do it. But I think that why is very, very important. So yes, that is critical. And I think if you embark on a transformation, from my own personal experience, you should put a page which should say why you are doing it on your desk so that it reinforces every day. Wearing a business leader and a CFO's hat, when you get a request for any tech project, forget HR or forget finance, or you get any project which is big transformation that you want to drive, the first question you ask yourself is saying, where am I going to pull the money from to pay for this project, right? It's, as they say in HR, you have to rob Peter to pay Paul. Similarly, it happens in the organization, right? You have to rob one department to pay for a project in the other department, because in the end, it's all very limited, right? And then you also have, as a CEO who supports HR, you also have to convince your CFO half the times. If there are CFOs in the room, my apology. But you have to half the time convince your CFO to say why we should do this project. But at that time, again, if as an HR leader, you are not able to articulate the why clearly, then you are not winning friends or supporters who will influence that decision. So I think that's very, very critical from a why standpoint, which I feel which should be there. Also, what happens is when you do a transformation, and and there is a lot of change that comes in, a lot of things which go differently, that whole why acts as an anchor.
Right.
I think that's where I would leave it.
Thank you, Amit, for sharing such a thoughtful response. So it's evident that HR transformation requires a strong process and people foundation. So how do you analyze and redesign existing processes before automation to ensure they're optimized and effective?
I think if you were to look at any transformation, I always tell, when I was the HR leader, I would tell my teams, I think we should all go and adopt the principle of systems thinking. While it's not an HR principle, but it's a great principle for any transformation that you want to do. And it's very simple. If you look at systems thinking, you first identify what process you want to do, or a couple of processes, because you can't change the world in one day. I think that's important. And then you just map that process out end to end, right? So map it end to end, irrespective of whether it has 10 stages or 21 stages or 32 stages. Just map it out end to end, break it down into every single touch point. Then the second piece is, how do you then bring in the stakeholders for each of the touch piece that you have in the project? And this is even before you want to change it. right? And then identify that whole process and say where it is broken and where it is not broken, and what the transformation will look like. How will it change? Especially wherever it is broken, is your transformation or is your project impacting to improve those pieces?
Right.
It's very easy to build on something that is working to say we will improve this from here to here and this is working is great. But what is not working, how do you analyze that? Then what are you going to get out of it? Are you decreasing the touch points? Are you focusing on efficiency or effectiveness? That's the question that you need to ask when you look at that end-to-end process and say, am I focusing on efficiency? Am I focusing on effectiveness? Or am I focusing on both? If you are focusing on both, you have a winner on your hand.
Agree.
Right? And then once you do all of that, then get the stakeholders early. You know, a lot of us in HR, and I still say us in HR because I am still a blue-blooded HR person, spent 20 years doing that. You know, a lot of us get only the external stakeholders at the end of the cycle or nearing the end of the cycle. Right? Within our teams, we work very well. So get those stakeholders in right. So if you are, let's say, doing an HRMS, right? Get the people managers in far earlier when they can give you a feedback rather than telling them later what they should be doing. And I'm just taking a very simple example. Right? And once you have then done that, then I think look at the whole, how are you going to, what are your checks and balances? What are your metrics that you are going to measure the success on? And build on these thoughts in the process. So, you know, just do the whole end-to-end, and also look at who is the end owner. Your customer could be the employee. Your customer could be the people leader, right? Or your customer could be the end customer also. Right? How does that impact that customer and definition of that customer and what will it impact? And it could be multiple people. So, you know, in my experience, any big tech HR transformation will have employees, people leaders, managers, and a lot, you know, it could be your partners and your agents. All of them would be impacted by that transformation. How do you bring all of those elements in on a one page? And then, you know, the best way that I think is do it is if you can do a map, and you can then chart that whole process out. I think that just works from a big tech analysis perspective. But in the end, it's also very important, how do you bring all of that together and tie it up?
Very important.
You know, because it's like a machinery. It's very easy to open it up. You still need to put everything in. So you've taken a process, you've analyzed it, you put in all the transformation, you've got the technology, and then you need to tie all of that up so that when it goes to the end user only sees the interface. You know, I always do the analogy, Karan, of the Apple device, right? I use that because it's a phone for dummies, as I say. But it's so simple outside, but it's so complicated, you know, from the back end. And what Apple does is takes the complication out. That's how we would need to do the process.
So that's very insightful, Amit. So what you said, that if you do not optimize the processes, then you will not get the output that you expect. So it is very important to optimize it. So let's delve a bit deeper into your experience in transforming HR technology with such a vast experience. So we would like to hear about a specific lesson that you learned in past transformation programs within your organization that now you believe these are the best practices.
Well, if you ask me about the lesson, then I can only think of all the times that I have failed because they are the best lessons.
Agreed, yeah.
You know, so I'll tell you, you know, in my earlier organization, and this is somewhere around 2015, 2016, when the HR tech still needed to be evolved to where it is today. We were trying to do an onboarding module, you know, being a distributed business, you know, somewhere around 100 odd branches at that time, and, you know, and doing an onboarding module. We got a great partner, we looked at the process, we thought that was the best process, but we completely forgot the whole input to the process was the internet bandwidth. And that too in a tier 2, tier 3 town of India where people would have to do what they needed to do to onboard, right? You know, when you are hiring in a Delhi or an NCR or a Bombay or the top 10, 15 countries, it's all great, right? But to do that and at that time, I think we just missed that out, you know. So we did the launch, we got the monies, we did everything. But in the end, when we started to put it to use, you know, whether they were our partners in small town recruitment consultants who, you know, kind of help you hire, or they were people who we were trying to hire, that whole one small thing as internet bandwidth, right? And second, the technology available at the person's disposal. Right, today with smartphones and everything else, you have a scan on your phone and stuff like that. But to do that at that time, to be able to have the technology available, I think these were the two banes that we actually got blindsided by. And you know, it wasn't a success. And And what I learned from there was obviously, the factors that you take, but also to fail fast. So I think we were one of the first functions who in 6 months realized we had failed and we shut it down and said we'll cut the losses. But I think sometimes the point that I want to share with you is sometimes there are factors which are more outside of the organization and outside of the process that impact the success of the process.
Right.
So I think that's
So
my
if
big
I have
learning.
to summarize, like you need to really, whenever doing any transformation, you need to consider each and every stakeholder, their needs before starting, and second, do it fast, fail, learn, and do it again.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you so much.
And
so,
also just to add, the environment then that person would be using. I think
so
that becomes important.
Right. So now let's switch our focus and explore the next important pillar of HR transformation, that is change management and user adoption. So I know like in few of your answers you have covered, but I would like you to, what is your approach in minimizing resistance to change while encouraging your team to embrace simplicity that technology brings in?
I think let's start by the first point that you asked. I think have clarity on why and then communicate your why.
Right.
And as you know, I'm sure the leaders here I'm preaching to the choir on change management, but it's about saying communicate and communicate to the why, and you can never do enough of it.
Right.
I think that's the first part of communicating the why. Second is, if you are communicating change, like I said earlier, bring in your stakeholders earlier, make them a party, right? It is about getting everybody together so that the ownership is built right at the initial stage. I think that's very, very important. The third is, I think, setting up the whole execution focus. The success of the project lies in the details of the execution that you are planning. So I think for me that's the third piece from a change perspective. The fourth is to have a very open channel of feedback, which is right here, right now, kind of an instant feedback. If someone is using it, how do they give you a feedback on step 1, on step 2, on step 3, and not wait to go to step 11 to give the feedback? Otherwise the feedback is lost. So how do you get immediate feedback? Then the agility to action on that feedback. If there are 10 people who have given you feedback, let's say on stage 2 of the process, how soon can you fix that out so that the other 20 who are going to come in don't face that challenge? I think that agility of acting on the feedback is very, very important. Then is sharing the success stories. And make sure the success stories are not HR oriented but are far more organization oriented success stories as you have it. So how do you share that success stories? And again, in success stories, we all wait to say we've just launched the project, we will give an update 30 days. No, but if you have a success story in the 30th minute, then share it on the 30th minute of the project, right? Similarly, if you have a failure, then address it. So share the success stories and then recognize people who have agreed to be the first people the early adopters. Right. We all recognize the project team who has done it. We recognize the people who have worked on it. We don't recognize the early adopters. And I think in any change management process, that early adopter recognition is very important to spread the message in the organization. Right? So I think those are the couple of things that I would focus on to do the change.
Your approach is truly comprehensive. So one thing from here I would like to, because I also do, as a founder, I do few of the transformation project related to HR, related to non-HR. But my struggle is that how to bring all the stakeholders so they also are equally invested, they spend some time. It becomes sometimes very difficult to really onboard everyone so any thought process, any approach on that? Because,
That's a tough one.
Because practically I have failed multiple times because of this reason. The thought process, whatever you have said, like it is covered, but anything.
I think that's a tough one.
Yeah.
And I think, I'll answer this in an organization context. Any big tech transformation or any transformation has to be owned by the organization. Right. And when I say the organization, I'm actually referring to the management team. Right. It has to be owned by the management team, irrespective of what function it comes from. And especially if it is coming from HR, then all the more it should not be seen as an HR initiative. We all say something nice that HR guy wants to do or that HR lady wants to do without being gender biased, or something nice the HR function wants to do, let us do it. I don't think that's the approach. I think once you have a buy-in at the top table of your colleagues in the leadership team or your key stakeholders, I think that's where the whole secret sauce is for it to be adopted. Right. Because your adoption and your success is dependent on the organization. Yes. No matter how good a job you may do, And I have seen in my own experience, and I have also encountered this, many good initiatives have failed because of lack of adoption, not for the want of the technology or that the execution was not good. So I think if that's the top table decision that happens, I think that's where the secret sauce lies.
I agree. So I have understood, so definitely I'll try to implement those things in my organization too. So last thing, so could you share a piece of advice or a guiding principle that you believe will be instrumental for all the CXOs sitting here to navigate the intersection between technology and HR as a discipline?
I think piece of advice, what do I give to all of those guys who are sitting here? They are far more experienced, but if I was to focus on two things for any transformation, one, I would focus on the user. So user centricity is number one. That's what I would say. Keep the user at the center. As they say in business, who is bringing the customer to the boardroom? I think every project should say who's bringing the user into the boardroom for the project, right? I think that's one. Second is, how do you balance automation with human touch? Not every process can be automated. And I know I'll upset some people when I say this, and it's a tech conference, but not every process can be automated. And even if you automate processes, you need to ask yourself saying, at what point am I going to have a touch, and at what point am I going to have a technology? Because sometimes you need the touch which the technology cannot replace. And in our own enthusiasm to be very tech-oriented professionals, we forget the touch and we negate it ourselves. So I think it's also our responsibility as HR people, as HR leaders, to balance that out and then stand and advocate the balance. Not only to balance it out, but advocate that balance fearlessly with courage and conviction. I think if you do that, you'll be good.
Thank you so much. So now we can open the floor to our audience. So we welcome your questions and thoughts on this discussion. So please.
Yeah, the lady.
So
can someone give her a mic?
Myself, Priyanka Singh, and my question is, as being a human HR possesses one intangible thing which is very uniqueness, and if we compare it within artificial intelligence integrated within HR, so what is the uniqueness which a human HR will have in the matter of intangible things which cannot be visible?
Well, that's very interesting. So let me start by saying that AI, intelligence, all of that is going to come into human resources, and it's already there, right? So we have to live with it. But I think if there is one thing that HR, as a HR person or as a human, you need to understand how do you handle the gray. The AI can handle the black, the AI can handle the white. But in my own experience, HR is not about white or black, right? That's very easy. We have our policies which make it white, we make it black. But how do you handle the gray? How do you handle the human situation that stems out from being gray, which is neither this side nor that side? And that's where you would need the human intelligence, that's where you would need the human touch to not only understand it, but also resolve for it, right?
Thank you so much.
So any more questions? Yeah.
There's a lady at the back.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So as you mentioned, HR people, they bring in a lot of new initiatives to the organization, and after a point of time, they say that it was a nice initiative, but it's not going to work, and they're not able to advocate it very well or place it very well in other stakeholders, right? And when actually HRs have to sell that technology if they like that technology a lot. So what are the key steps they should do if they really like the technology and sell it to the other stakeholders for the organization?
I think you need to understand the purpose of what the business is. What's the key drivers for the business in that annual year or in the next 2 to 3 years? Then look at what you are proposing and how will it impact that and improve that. How does it lead to enable the organization to achieve its goals for the next 2 to 3 years period by doing that initiative? If you are able to answer that and build that linkage, you will always get support no matter how big or small the initiative is. If it's a nice to do initiative which will give us a very ambiguous return and you are not able to quantify the impact, you will always have a challenge. So along with the why, your quantification of impact on how will it help the organization move forward, not the function move forward. I think if you are able to differentiate that, you will always get support.